On a crisp January day in 2025, the nation gathered in anticipation, bracing for what many hoped would be a new chapter in American history. The air was electric with both hope and uncertainty, as citizens and dignitaries from around the world watched the events unfold in Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump, returning to the world stage, delivered an inaugural address that stunned the world and sent shockwaves through the international community. His words, bold and unfiltered, immediately set the tone for what would become one of the most controversial moments in modern U.S. foreign policy. In a move that few had predicted, Trump declared that the United States would re-establish control over the Panama Canal, a vital artery of global trade. He called the 1999 handover to Panama a grave mistake, blaming what he described as weak and short-sighted American leaders for surrendering such a strategic asset. The announcement left many in disbelief, as the canal has long been a symbol of international cooperation and Panamanian sovereignty. Trump went further, openly accusing Panama of mismanagement and neglect, suggesting that the canal's operations had suffered under Panamanian control. He painted a picture of inefficiency and corruption, fueling concerns about the canal's future and its impact on global commerce. Without providing concrete evidence, Trump claimed that China was secretly pulling the strings behind the canal, using its influence to gain leverage over international shipping routes. He warned that America could not stand by while a rival power threatened its interests in the Western Hemisphere, raising the specter of a new era of great power competition. To rally support, Trump invoked the memory of the thousands of American workers who toiled and sacrificed their lives to build the canal over a century ago. He dramatically inflated the death toll, using their legacy to build an emotional case for reclaiming the canal as an American birthright, a symbol of national pride and determination. The message was unmistakable. Trump argued that Panama had failed as a responsible steward, and that only America could ensure the canal's security and prosperity. He called on Congress and the American people to support his bold vision, framing it as a matter of national honor and global leadership. The crowd at the inauguration erupted in cheers, energized by Trump's defiant rhetoric. But around the world, leaders and citizens alike watched in shock and apprehension. Newsrooms buzzed with urgent updates, and diplomatic channels lit up as governments scrambled to respond to the unfolding crisis. Trump had drawn a line in the sand, setting the stage for a dramatic international standoff that would test alliances and reshape global politics. The question was no longer if a crisis was coming, but when and how it would unfold. The world held its breath, waiting to see what the next chapter in this high-stakes drama would bring. Panama's response was swift and resolute. President José Raúl Mulino, newly in office, called Trump's claims baseless and an insult to Panamanian sovereignty. He declared the canal belonged unequivocally to Panama and renegotiation was off the table. Mulino dismantled Trump's assertions, emphasizing the canal's neutral, independent management and rejecting any foreign control. Panamanians rallied behind their president, recalling a history of U.S. intervention and viewing the canal as a symbol of hard-won independence. Protests erupted in Panama City, and the government refused to discuss the canal's ownership. Diplomats built international support, framing the issue as a test of treaty law and national sovereignty. The message: Panama would not bend. Any attempt to retake the canal would meet fierce resistance from both government and people. The canal was now a matter of national destiny. The canal's history is one of ambition, sacrifice, and resentment. The French failed first, losing over 20,000 lives to disease. The U.S. secured the canal zone in 1903, building an American enclave in Panama. Construction from 1904 to 1914 cost 5,600 lives, mostly black Caribbean laborers, not Americans. The canal zone was segregated, fueling Panamanian resentment. In 1964, riots over flag rights left 22 Panamanians and 4 Americans dead, galvanizing nationalism. The 1977 Torrijos-Carter treaties set a path to Panamanian control. Despite U.S. opposition, the treaties were ratified. On December 31, 1999, Panama assumed full control, ending a century of American dominance. For Panama, it was a triumph; for some Americans, a loss never accepted. Trump's case for retaking the canal is built on shaky ground. His claim of 38,000 American deaths is false. Most who died were Caribbean laborers. Canal toll increases affect all nations, not just the U.S., and are driven by drought and water shortages. The Panama Canal Authority remains neutral, applying rules equally. Claims of Chinese control are misleading. CK Hutchison, a Hong Kong company, runs nearby ports, not the canal itself. There's no evidence of Chinese military involvement in canal operations. The administration's rhetoric blurs commercial interests with strategic control, fueling unnecessary fears. The Panama Canal is a vital artery for global trade, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific and handling 6% of maritime commerce. For the U.S., it's essential. 40% of American container traffic relies on it, especially for agriculture and energy exports. Disruption would raise costs and hurt competitiveness. For Panama, the canal is the economic engine and a source of national pride, generating billions and funding public services. Since 1999, Panama has expanded and expertly managed the canal, proving its capability. The stakes are immense. For the U.S., it's about efficiency and access. For Panama, survival and sovereignty. Panama's successful stewardship is why it fiercely resists any suggestion of foreign control. The canal's smooth operation is crucial for both nations, but for Panama, it's existential. That's why the world is watching so closely. U.S. anxiety over the canal is deeply rooted in its ongoing rivalry with China, a competition that now stretches far beyond military might and into the heart of global commerce. The Panama Canal, a vital artery for international trade, has become a new front in this struggle for influence and control. The real concern for Washington isn't the presence of Chinese troops or warships, but rather the subtle and powerful economic leverage that China wields. CK Hutchison, a major Chinese conglomerate, controls the ports at both entrances to the canal, giving Beijing a strategic foothold in one of the world's most critical shipping choke points. U.S. officials worry that, in a time of crisis, China could pressure CK Hutchison to disrupt shipping traffic, slow down the flow of goods, or even use advanced port technology for intelligence gathering. The fear is that these ports could become tools for economic coercion or espionage, rather than just gateways for trade. So far, there's no evidence that China has used its access for military purposes. Panama, for its part, maintains strict neutrality and robust security measures, determined to keep the canal open and impartial for all nations. The country's authorities are vigilant, aware that their reputation and prosperity depend on trust from the global community. Still, the Trump administration responded with pressure, urging Panama to withdraw from China's Belt and Road Initiative and encouraging U.S. companies to acquire the Chinese-operated ports. This diplomatic push reflects a broader strategy to limit China's reach in the Western Hemisphere and to reassert American influence in a region long considered its backyard. Ultimately, this contest is less about immediate threats and more about shaping the future balance of power. Both nations are maneuvering to secure their interests, anticipating how influence over the canal could tip the scales in the decades to come. The real struggle is for strategic high ground, control over the flow of global trade and the ability to project power, rather than the canal itself as a physical asset. For Panama, neutrality is not just a policy, but an economic necessity. The nation's prosperity depends on being a trusted, impartial gateway for the world's commerce. Any overt interference by China would risk international backlash and could ultimately undermine its own interests. In the end, the U.S. is fighting to keep the canal within its sphere of influence, but the battle is being waged with economic tools and diplomatic pressure, not with armies or fleets. The future of the canal and the balance of power it represents remains uncertain, shaped by the shifting tides of global rivalry. In April 2025, the United States and Panama signed a sweeping new security pact, marking a dramatic shift in their relationship. The agreement granted U.S. forces access to several former American military bases, allowing for joint operations on Panamanian soil for the first time in decades. This move was presented as a bold step to address regional threats, but it also reopened old wounds from a complicated past. Officially, the pact was designed to combat drug trafficking and strengthen border security, two issues that have plagued Central America for years. Both governments emphasized the need for cooperation to tackle powerful cartels and transnational crime, promising that the agreement would bring stability and safety to the region. However, the pact's vague language and the absence of clear limits on troop numbers quickly fueled public suspicion. Many Panamanians saw it as a backdoor for a renewed U.S. military presence, raising fears that their sovereignty was once again at risk. Protests erupted across Panama City and beyond, with demonstrators recalling the painful legacy of U.S. occupation and the traumatic 1989 invasion. For many, these memories were still fresh, and the new agreement felt like history repeating itself. The Mulino government defended the pact, insisting it was essential for protecting the Panama Canal, a vital artery of global trade. Officials argued that increased security was necessary in a world of growing threats, but the timing of the deal, just months after a contentious election, only deepened public mistrust. The agreement quickly became a flashpoint, dividing Panamanian society. Heated debates erupted in parliament and in the streets, as citizens weighed the promise of security against the cost to national pride and independence. For many, the sight of U.S. troops returning to Panamanian soil was a stark reminder of a time when their country's destiny was shaped by foreign powers. The issue became a rallying cry for those demanding respect for Panamanian sovereignty. Instead of building trust, the pact reignited old anxieties about American dominance and interference. The wounds of the past, never fully healed, were suddenly reopened, fueling a new wave of protests and public debate. Rather than providing reassurance, the agreement plunged Panama into political turmoil. News outlets buzzed with controversy, and the government faced mounting pressure from all sides. Now the fate of the Panama Canal, long a symbol of national pride, was caught up in a broader struggle for dignity, independence, and the right to determine Panama's own future. The Trump administration faces risky choices. Military intervention is possible but would be catastrophic. Global condemnation, civilian casualties, and a likely insurgency. The canal itself could be damaged, disrupting the trade it's meant to protect. Economic sanctions are less dramatic but would cripple Panama's economy and hurt U.S. businesses. Sanctions could push Panama closer to China, undermining U.S. goals. Both options would damage America's credibility and alliances, signaling that treaties mean little. The crisis is about more than a waterway. It's a test of U.S. leadership. Will America lead by force or partnership? The world is watching, and the stakes are global. The wrong move could haunt U.S. foreign policy for years. The canal's future hangs in the balance. Confrontation, military or economic, would destabilize Panama, disrupt trade, and hand China a propaganda victory. Compromise is possible. The U.S. could drop threats in exchange for security guarantees and more transparent port oversight. This would require treating Panama as a partner, not a subordinate. The most likely outcome is tense coexistence, ongoing diplomacy, audits, and security reviews, avoiding outright conflict. The canal crisis mirrors a larger challenge. Can the U.S. adapt to a world where it's no longer the sole superpower? The choices made now will echo far beyond Panama. Will the U.S. build bridges, or try to seize them? The world waits for the answer.